Imagine a world where royal blood was a curse, where the very lineage meant a life of unspeakable horror hidden behind gilded palace walls. What if I told you that in the opulent courts of Europe, princesses were not just pawns in political marriages, but victims of a horrifying ancient cult that demanded the unthinkable? This isn't just dark history. It's a chilling exposé of power, perversion, and the desperate struggle for survival. For centuries, whispers have echoed through the forgotten archives. Tales of beautiful, innocent women forced into incestuous unions, not for love or alliance, but for a twisted ritual. Sarah, a young princess betrothed to a distant duke, had no idea the true horror awaiting her in the shadowed halls of the House of Valois. Her dreams of a grand future were about to shatter, replaced by a nightmare of forbidden practices and a shocking revelation that would turn her world upside down. Everyone believes these royal families were the epitome of grace and civilization, but the truth is far more sinister. There was a secret society embedded within the highest echelons of power, manipulating destinies and defiling generations. This cult believed that only through the purest, most concentrated bloodline, achieved through unimaginable acts, could they maintain their divine right to rule and unlock forbidden knowledge. The moment Sarah realized her own father, the king, was not just aware, but a central figure in this depraved cult, her life transformed from fairy tale to psychological prison. She was trapped, her desperate desire for freedom clashing with the iron grip of tradition and terror. What happened next changed everything, not just for Sarah, but for the very fabric of European aristocracy. You're about to uncover the forbidden history, the shocking truth that was meticulously erased from the official records, a secret so profound it could destabilize kingdoms even today. Prepare to witness the horrifying reality of princesses forced into incest and the royal bloodline's most terrifying cult. The air in the chamber grew thick with a silence that pressed down on Sarah like a physical weight. Her discovery, the hidden ledgers detailing generations of forced unions and the systematic silencing of any who dared defy the bloodline, solidified the horrifying truth. This wasn't just about her. It was a sprawling, insidious network that had ensnared countless lives. A faint creak from the hallway startled her, and she instinctively clutched the heavy tome to her chest, her heart hammering against her ribs. It was her father, his face etched with a rare, unsettling blend of concern and something darker, something she couldn't quite decipher. "You've been in here for hours, my dear," he said, his voice smooth, too smooth. "Lost in old histories?" Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. He rarely ventured into this part of the library, and his presence now felt less like a coincidence and more like a trap. She forced a smile, a brittle mask she hoped he wouldn't see through. "Just a fascinating account of ancient lineages," she replied, gesturing vaguely at the shelves, careful to keep the ledger out of his direct line of sight. His eyes, however, seemed to fix on the very spot where the ledger lay partially concealed. A flicker of recognition, or perhaps suspicion, crossed his features. "Indeed," he mused, stepping closer, "our lineage is unique." He reached out, not for the book, but for her hand, his grip unexpectedly firm. "There are traditions, Sarah, that must be upheld, no matter the cost." The unspoken threat hung heavy in the air, a cold promise of what awaited her if she strayed from the path laid out for her. Just as the tension became unbearable, a servant burst in, breathless. "Your Majesty, an urgent dispatch from the eastern provinces. The unrest is spreading." The sudden interruption provided a crucial reprieve. Her father's attention snapped away, his grip loosening as he turned, his mind already shifting to matters of state. Sarah watched him go, her breath finally exhaling in a shaky rush. The moment of false hope that she might somehow escape his watchful eye evaporated. He knew, or at least he suspected enough to make her next move infinitely more perilous. The ledgers, the proof, now felt like a ticking bomb. She had to act, and quickly, before the traditions swallowed her whole. Sarah wasted no time. The ledger, heavy with the weight of generations, became her weapon. She bypassed the formal channels, knowing any official appeal would be swallowed by the very system she sought to dismantle. Instead, she sought out the one person in the court who possessed both influence and a fiercely independent spirit. Lady Elara, her former governess, now a respected scholar. Elara's chambers were a sanctuary of parchment and quiet contemplation. The scent of aged paper and dried herbs hung in the air, a stark contrast to the oppressive grandeur of the main palace. Sunlight, filtered through a stained glass window, cast colorful patterns across stacks of ancient texts and maps. When Sarah unrolled the ledger, its pages filled with damning names and dates. Elara's eyes, usually so calm, widened in horror. The initial shock gave way to a cold, calculating resolve. "This is more than just tradition, my dear," Elara whispered, tracing a finger over a particularly grotesque entry. "This is a perversion, a sickness." Her voice, though low, carried an immense weight of conviction. Their plan was audacious. They wouldn't expose the king directly, not yet. Such a move would be seen as treason and crushed instantly. The cult's roots ran too deep, their power too absolute. Instead, they would target the most vulnerable link in the chain. The upcoming betrothal ceremony of Princess Anya, Sarah's younger cousin, to their own half-brother, Prince Kyle. Anya, a timid girl of 15, had always been overshadowed by her more assertive siblings. Her forced union with Kyle, a man known for his cruelty and devotion to the sacred traditions, was a particularly egregious example of the cult's practices. The public spectacle, the forced smiles, the unsettling implications. It was the perfect stage to reveal the truth to a wider audience, to sow the seeds of doubt among the unsuspecting nobility. The day of the betrothal arrived, a lavish affair meant to showcase royal unity and the unbreakable strength of the Valois bloodline. The grand hall of the palace shimmered with gold and velvet. Courtiers in their finest silks whispered excitedly, their faces alight with anticipation. Sarah stood beside Elara, a nervous tremor in her hands, her heart pounding a rhythm against her ribs that echoed the distant drum beats of the ceremony. The air was thick with the scent of lilies and beeswax candles. As the high priest began the ancient rites, his voice booming through the vast hall, invoking blessings upon the sacred bloodline, Elara gave Sarah a subtle nod. Sarah swallowed hard, her mouth suddenly dry. She clutched the ledger, hidden beneath her ceremonial robes, its edges digging into her skin, a constant, tangible reminder of the burden she carried. She stepped forward, her legs feeling like lead, but her resolve hardening with each step. Her voice, though trembling at first, gained strength as she spoke, cutting through the hushed reverence of the hall like a sharp blade. "There are truths," Sarah declared, her gaze sweeping across the stunned faces of the court, "that have been buried for too long." A ripple of confusion, then murmurs, spread through the assembled nobles. With a dramatic flourish, she unfurled the ledger, its pages filled with damning names and dates, now visible to all. Gasps rippled through the crowd, quickly turning into a crescendo of shocked exclamations. The king's face, usually a mask of regal composure, contorted in a silent snarl, his eyes burning with a furious, murderous intent. Before his guards could react, Elara, with surprising speed and precision, projected images from the ledger onto the grand tapestries that adorned the hall. Using a hidden device she had meticulously crafted from polished lenses and a powerful oil lamp, names, dates, and family trees, normally confined to dusty archives, now loomed large, undeniable proof of the incestuous unions, the forced marriages, the generations of genetic deformities and madness that had been meticulously concealed. The court erupted in a cacophony of shouts and murmurs, a wave of outrage and disbelief washing over the assembled nobility. The high priest, his face ashen, stumbled backward, his sacred texts suddenly feeling profane, his pronouncements of divine right hollow. The carefully constructed illusion of divine right shattered into 1,000 pieces. In the ensuing chaos, Princess Anya, seeing the truth laid bare, her own fate illuminated by the damning projections, recoiled from Prince Kael. She refused to take his hand, her all act of defiance a ripple that turned into a wave, becoming a powerful symbol of the kingdom's awakening. The king, his authority crumbling before his very eyes, was powerless to stop the truth from spreading like wildfire. Sarah had not merely exposed a secret. She had ignited a revolution. The immediate aftermath was pandemonium. Guards loyal to the king moved to seize Sarah, but the sheer volume of shocked and enraged courtiers created a living barrier. Whispers turned into shouts, shouts into cries for justice. The projections on the tapestries, stark and undeniable, had done their work. The carefully cultivated image of divine purity, the very foundation of the Valois reign, lay shattered. People who had blindly accepted the king's authority for generations now saw the grotesque truth of its origins. Sarah, protected by the swirling crowd, felt a surge of exhilaration mixed with a terrifying dread. She had struck a blow, but the war was far from over. The king, his face a mask of purple fury, bellowed orders, but his voice was lost in the din. His personal guard, accustomed to immediate obedience, hesitated, caught between their sworn duty and the palpable disgust emanating from the court. Elara, ever pragmatic, seized the moment. "The truth is out," she cried, her voice surprisingly strong, cutting through the chaos. "Will you stand by and allow this perversion to continue? Will you allow your own daughters to be sacrificed on the altar of this false divinity?" Her words resonated, striking a chord of fear and anger in the hearts of many. Several noblemen, their faces pale, began to openly voice their dissent. The king, realizing the extent of the damage, ordered a full lockdown of the palace, but it was too late. Servants, merchants, even minor nobles who had witnessed the scene carried the scandalous news beyond the palace walls. Like a plague, the truth spread through the capital, infecting every tavern, every market square, every household. The people, long oppressed by the king's heavy hand, found a new, horrifying reason for their suffering. The divine right of kings, once an unshakable dogma, was now a grotesque joke. Sarah and Elara, recognizing the fleeting nature of their advantage, retreated amidst the confusion. They knew the king would retaliate with brutal efficiency once he regained control. Their immediate goal was to rally support, to turn the initial shock into sustained resistance. They found refuge in a hidden chamber beneath the old library, a place Elara had discovered years ago, accessible only through a cleverly disguised passage. Days turned into nights, filled with clandestine meetings. Messengers, disguised as commoners, slipped in and out of the palace, carrying word of the unfolding rebellion to sympathetic noble houses and disgruntled military commanders. The ledger, now a symbol of their cause, was copied meticulously, its damning contents distributed far and wide. Each copy was a spark, igniting new pockets of resistance across the kingdom. The king, meanwhile, was in a desperate struggle to quell the uprising. He ordered public executions of anyone caught spreading treasonous lies, but his brutal tactics only fueled the flames of rebellion. The people, emboldened by Sarah's courage and Elara's strategic genius, began to openly defy his authority. Supply lines to the palace were disrupted, taxes went uncollected, and the king's once loyal army began to show cracks, with entire regiments deserting. One evening, a trusted messenger brought grim news. Prince Kael, humiliated and enraged by Anya's public rejection, had sworn a blood oath to hunt down Sarah and Elara. He had begun rounding up suspected sympathizers, torturing them for information. The stakes had never been higher. Sarah felt the weight of her actions, the lives now endangered because of her choices. Yet she knew there was no turning back. The path to freedom was paved with peril. Anya, the timid princess, had been placed under house arrest, but her act of defiance had ignited a spark within her. She refused food, she refused to speak, and her silent protest became a powerful symbol of resistance within the palace walls. Her guards, many of whom had heard the rumors, found themselves increasingly conflicted. Alara proposed a daring plan. They would rescue Anya, not just to save her, but to transform her into a living embodiment of their cause. Her innocence, her public humiliation, and her defiant stand would make her an irresistible rallying point for the people. Sarah, despite her fear, agreed. The rescue would be dangerous, requiring them to infiltrate the most heavily guarded section of the palace. Under the cloak of a moonless night, Sarah and Alara, disguised as palace laundresses, slipped through the labyrinthine corridors. Every shadow seemed to hold a lurking guard. Every creak of the floorboards echoed like a thunderclap. Sarah's heart hammered, a frantic drum against her ribs. They reached Anya's chambers, guarded by 2 hulking royal knights. Alara, with a surprising display of agility, created a diversion, dropping a heavy basket of linens with a loud clatter. As the guards turned, Sarah, moving with a newfound grace born of desperation, struck one with a concealed lead pipe, while Alara dispatched the other with a swift, silent blow to the temple. They were not just scholars and princesses. They were now warriors in a desperate fight for survival. Anya, pale and trembling, huddled in a corner of her room. When she saw Sarah, her eyes, once filled with fear, lit up with a fragile hope. "You came," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Sarah embraced her cousin, a silent promise of protection passing between them. They led Anya through secret passages, known only to a select few, passages that Alara had meticulously mapped out years ago, driven by an academic curiosity that now proved to be their salvation. Their escape from the palace was a harrowing ordeal. They countered patrols, dodged search parties, and at one point had to hide in a dusty, forgotten storeroom, listening to the heavy boots of the king's guard pass just inches from their flimsy hiding place. The air was thick with tension, every breath held, every muscle tensed. Finally, under the cover of a dense fog that rolled in from the river, they slipped through a little-used gate, meeting a small band of loyalists waiting with horses. As they galloped away from the illuminated palace, its golden windows now seeming like malevolent eyes, Sarah looked back. The once majestic edifice now appeared like a prison, a monument to the cult's depravity. Anya, riding beside her, clutched Sarah's hand, her grip surprisingly strong. Her ordeal had transformed her, hardening her resolve. The timid princess was gone, replaced by a nascent leader. News of Anya's escape and her open support for Sarah's cause sent shockwaves through the kingdom. The king's authority, already teetering, began to crumble rapidly. The people, seeing their beloved young princess stand against the tyranny, rallied to the rebellion's banner. Peasants, merchants, even disillusioned noblemen flocked to Sarah's growing army. Their base of operations became an ancient fortress, hidden deep within a remote mountain range. It was a place of stark beauty and harsh realities, where the wind howled through ancient stone battlements, a constant reminder of the difficult struggle ahead. Here, Sarah, Alara, and Anya began to forge their disparate forces into a cohesive fighting unit. Alara, with her strategic mind, organized supply lines and intelligence networks. Sarah, with her innate leadership, inspired and trained the growing ranks of rebels. Anya, despite her youth, became the face of the rebellion, her speeches delivered with a quiet dignity, moving hearts and minds across the kingdom. The king, desperate to regain control, dispatched Prince Kael with the largest contingent of royal forces. Kael, driven by a personal vendetta and a fanatical belief in the cult's dogma, was ruthless. He burned villages, seized crops, and executed anyone suspected of harboring rebel sympathies. The conflict escalated into a full-blown civil war. tearing the kingdom apart. One day, a scout brought news that Khail's forces were marching directly towards their mountain stronghold. The final confrontation was imminent. Sarah felt a cold dread settle in her stomach, but also a fierce determination. She had come too far, sacrificed too much to turn back now. She addressed her assembled forces, her voice clear and strong despite the tremor in her hands. "We fight not just for our lives," she declared, "but for the future of this kingdom, for the freedom of every child, for the honor of every family. We fight to break the chains of a perversion that has poisoned our land for centuries." A roar of approval rose from the ranks, echoing through the mountain passes. The battle was brutal. Khail's forces, though larger and better equipped, were demoralized by the widespread dissent and their own internal conflicts. Sarah's rebels, fighting for their homes and their freedom, fought with a ferocity born of desperation. Arrows rained down, swords clashed, and the air filled with the cries of battle. Sarah, wielding a sword she had practiced with tirelessly, fought on the front lines, her presence inspiring her troops. Elara, from a strategic vantage point, directed their movements, her tactical brilliance turning the tide in several critical moments. Anya, though not on the battlefield, rallied the wounded and provided support, her unwavering spirit a beacon of hope. In the thick of the fighting, Sarah found herself face to face with Prince Khail. His eyes, filled with a crazed fanaticism, burned with hatred. "You have defiled our sacred bloodline, traitor!" he snarled, lunging at her with a heavy broadsword. Sarah parried his blow, the clash of steel ringing in her ears. She was not a trained warrior, but her desperation gave her strength. She fought not with skill, but with pure, unadulterated will. Khail was stronger, more experienced, but Sarah fought with the fire of generations of silenced women burning within her. Their duel was a microcosm of the larger conflict, a clash between the dying corruption of the old order and the nascent hope of a new future. Khail pressed his attack, his blows relentless, forcing Sarah onto the defensive. She stumbled, narrowly avoiding a fatal thrust. Just as his sword descended for the killing blow, a figure darted between them. It was Anya, her face set with a fierce determination, holding a discarded spear. She had left the safety of the rear, driven by an instinct to protect her cousin. Khail, momentarily stunned by Anya's unexpected intervention, hesitated. That split second was all Sarah needed. With a desperate lunge, she thrust her sword forward, finding a gap in Khail's armor. He gasped, his eyes widening in shock, then disbelief, as he crumpled to the ground. The fanaticism faded from his eyes, replaced by a flicker of fear. Then, nothing. Prince Khail, the zealous enforcer of the cult, was dead. His death sent a shockwave through the royal forces. Demoralized and leaderless, they broke ranks and fled. Their will to fight evaporated. The rebels, though exhausted and wounded, erupted in cheers. The battle was won. News of Khail's defeat and the rebellion's victory spread like wildfire. The king, isolated and abandoned by his dwindling loyalists, was finally apprehended in his chambers, attempting to burn the last remaining copies of the cult's sacred texts. He was a broken man, his power stripped away, his divine right revealed as a monstrous lie. The aftermath was a period of profound upheaval and cautious optimism. Sarah, Elara, and Anya, now hailed as heroes, faced the daunting task of rebuilding a fractured kingdom. The cult's influence, deeply embedded in every facet of society, would take generations to fully eradicate. But the first crucial step had been taken. The truth had been revealed, and the people, once blind, now saw clearly. Sarah, though weary, felt a sense of purpose she had never known. She refused the crown, instead advocating for a council of nobles and commoners, a new form of governance that would prevent the concentration of power that had led to such depravity. Elara became a key advisor, her wisdom and knowledge invaluable in navigating the complex political landscape. Anya, no longer timid, became a powerful voice for reform, tirelessly working to heal the wounds of the Civil War and ensure that no child would ever again suffer the fate of her ancestors. The grand halls of the palace, once filled with the chilling silence of unspoken horrors, now echoed with the sounds of open debate and the hopeful laughter of children. The tapestries, once used to project the damning evidence of the cult, were replaced with vibrant scenes depicting the kingdom's rich history and its aspirations for a just future. The royal bloodline, once a curse, was now a symbol of resilience. The princesses, once pawns in a terrifying game, had become the architects of their own destiny and the liberators of their people. The secret, once meticulously erased, was now openly discussed, a stark reminder of the dangers of unchecked power and the enduring strength of truth. The House of Valois, forever tainted by its dark past, was slowly, painstakingly being reborn, not through blood, but through justice and the unwavering courage of those who dared to speak out. This was not just a story of rebellion. It was a testament to the power of one individual to shatter centuries of silence and redefine the very meaning of royalty. The whispers of the past would never be forgotten, but they would now serve as a warning, ensuring that such horrors would never again be allowed to fester in the gilded cages of power. The legacy of the sacred bloodline had been rewritten not in the shadows of perversion, but in the light of freedom.